Wow, look at all those stars, galaxies, some of those supernovas. How can a dying star blowing up in space be so incredibly beautiful? Hello, I'm Ed Van Gennep, President of the Museum of Natural Science and History, and founding WOW, Nature's World of Wonder, the museum showcasing evidence from science, contrasting the theory of evolution that we came about by chance with that of creation, that there is a creator. He created all these stars, he created this planet, he created us. I live in Toronto. I worked for IBM for 28 years as a programmer and a manager of programmers until I retired so I could work full-time on building this museum. The purpose of the museum is to showcase science that we don't see in the mainstream media, but we're going to do it in a very fun, exciting, and interactive way. Scientists think that a supernova is a huge explosion of a star that is nearing the end of its life. The star collapses in on itself. The internal pressure from the collapse eventually gets so great that it blows apart in an incredible display of light and energy. Scientists who study the universe and space believe we came about through a process called the Big Bang that happened over 13 billion years ago. Over those 13 billion years, stars have formed and stars have come to an end of their life. And at the end is when the supernovas happen. The supernova has three phases. The first phase, right after the explosion, is when the shock wave goes out into space. It goes out at a fairly constant speed, and it lasts a few hundred years. In the second phase, the expansion continues but slows down as that shock wave from the expansion starts to interact with matter and gases in space. This phase lasts from 10,000 to 20,000 years. During the third phase, the matter continues to cool. Atoms start forming, and now gravity takes over and it starts to collapse back in on itself. This last phase lasts a couple 100,000 years. Based on how old the universe is, scientists calculate we should see stars in all three phases of the supernova process. The calculations state that we should expect to find 2 supernovas in phase 1, 2,260 supernovas in phase 2, and about 5,000 supernovas in phase 3. But when we look out into our Milky Way, into our galaxy, how many do we actually see? In actuality, they found 5 phase 1 supernovas, only 200, not 2,260 phase 2 supernovas, and none, 0 phase 3 supernovas. Why is the evidence so different than their predictions? What could be the cause? Let's make a different assumption. Let's assume the universe is only about 7,000 years old. If we redo the calculations, how many do we expect to see of these supernovas? In actual fact, we should see 2 phase 1 supernovas, about 125 phase 2 supernovas, and again 0 phase 3 supernovas. Wow! Using this age for the universe, we get results that very closely match the predictions. But does it make sense to assume the universe is only 7,000 years old, when supposedly we came about by a Big Bang over 13 billion years ago? Well, let's look at this from a different angle, a different perspective. Looking at the data from supernovas, we see that the universe could be about 7,000 years old. So using that data, we can develop a conclusion. Let's assume that is correct, that the universe is 7,000 years old. And then let's look for more evidence. Looking at the data for supernovas, we can see the universe is about 7,000 years old. So using that data as a starting point, we can look for further evidence to see if other evidence confirms that time frame or not. Through these videos, you have seen up to this point a lot of evidence that confirming the universe is young, not old. Thus, our assumption that we started with, that the universe is 7,000 years old, does seem to fit the data. So it's not a random blind assumption, starting point. It actually corresponds to what we see. Further support comes from the Bible, the only historical book that says anything about where we came from and the creation of the universe. Using the ages of individuals in the Bible, we can see how they correspond to other historical events that have been documented throughout history. From that, we can go backwards to find when everything began. In actual fact, it turns out to be about 6,000 years ago, very close to the 7,000 year time frame that the supernova data predicts. The Bible also tells us that everything was created virtually at the same time, over 6 literal days. All the universe, the stars, the planets were created, the vegetables, plants, then the animals, mankind, all created within a couple days of each other. We didn't evolve over billions of years. The Museum of Natural Science and History will share this kind of information in a fun, interactive, and exciting way, and much more, in more detail. Can you help us to bring this kind of science, this kind of evidence into our daily lives? Will you invest with us to share this information? Will you invest with us to share this side of the story? Help us to build nature's world of wonders. Wow. That way, when it opens in a few years, you'll be able to say, wow, I was part of that.